Evening. Welcome back. I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education, Monday, January 8th, 2024. First things first, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Next, we'll review and approve the agenda. Can I get a motion? Erica, second. Matt, all in favor? It's unanimous and everybody's here. Now we'll go on to approve the minutes. First, from the November 28th workshop, which I'm pretty sure everybody was at. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes? Wex, Laura, all in favor? And then the December 18th meeting, if we can get a motion to approve those minutes. Matt, and second, Julie, all in favor? It's unanimous as well. Moving on to comments from the public. To ensure that public's right to be heard, the board has set aside some time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allowed at each speaker with a max of 15 minutes to each subject. Anybody want to come forward from the public with comments? All right, seeing as there are none, we'll move right on to action items. First of which is the Facilities Board of Education Special Committee Charter. This is a second read. Anything that we need to discuss?
We haven't heard any feedback. We think that the charter will help us to accomplish our goals of understanding our facilities needs in light of some changing enrollment patterns and otherwise. So I think we're in good shape.
Excellent, and we agree. So a motion to accept as a second reading the Facilities BOE Special Committee Charter. Sorry.
Yeah, I just had one change. Sorry it's coming late, but we talk about projected elementary enrollment increases. I just wonder if we should say enrollment increases because, you know, they move through the system, not just the elementary level, obviously. Thoughts on that, just to make it a little bit broader?
Yep, could certainly do that. Why don't we say projected enrollment fluctuations or changes, because it is, while it's going up elementary, it is decreasing secondary because of the way the waves move through.
Yeah.
So just to open it up, so projected enrollment fluctuations. Okay.
Sorry, I got overly excited there, Brendan. Any other comments, suggestions? Okay, I'm going to try it a second time.
It's just a vote.
So now it's a vote since we already had the motion last time. Still learning, thank you. So if we can, anyway, all in favor of, with Brendan's amendment, suggested amendment of the projected enrollment fluctuations, all in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the big one. We got the superintendent's 2024-2025 budget proposal.
Sure, I will go to the. All right, well, thank you, Hugo, and thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Penny. It is my privilege tonight to present to you the superintendent's proposed budget for our next fiscal year, which will be 2024-2025. Hard to believe. I'll talk a little bit more about the cover when we get to the portrait of the graduate brief discussion, but what you see there is the culmination of the work that we had done together with the community, the board, teachers, many students in identifying our competencies and dispositions for all of our students prior to graduation. And we felt like that was a great way to lead into our budget itself. And I want to say thanks to Michelle Schneider for putting that together for us. I think she did a fabulous job. The good news tonight for all of you is that Clemson is not in the national championship. The bad news for me is that Clemson is not in the national championship. But I do believe that the time that we'll spend tonight is a great initial foray into our work that we'll be doing around the budget. As you know, we've been working to schedule a budget workshop together that we will have on the 16th, and we'll meet at 5:30 over at 220 Elm, and I'll get into the meetings in a moment. But at that workshop, we will be able to go in whatever depth board members and would like to go in as we work our way through and make sure that everyone feels comfortable and understands the budget, has an opportunity for feedback and input as we work our way through this year's budget process. Ultimately, as you know, the budget transitions from the superintendent's budget proposal to the Board of Education's budget proposal as it moves through the town. But to begin with for us tonight, the excellence of our school system, the New Canaan Public Schools, it exists throughout the system. The Board of Education, each of you here tonight, you're one strong example of that excellence. And I want to say thank you to each of you. What people often fail to realize is, our 9-member volunteer board comes together to do this work because you care, because you're committed, because you want to do the best that you can on behalf of the students, faculty, staff, and citizens here in New Canaan. And your active service, your thoughtful approach, your excellent feedback helps us to always be our very best on behalf of the students and community that we serve. So I want to say thank you, and I want to say that it is a privilege to be here presenting this to you tonight. Education is an incredibly complex endeavor, and our success is made possible thanks to the many outstanding professionals that we have across our schools. Our district is incredibly fortunate to have such dedicated and passionate professionals, whether they're faculty, staff, administrators, everyone who has a hand in doing the work that we do and serving our kids and our community. I want to start tonight by thanking one person in particular who really has been nose to the grindstone since the moment she walked into our district only 6 months ago. Pat Marinan is our budget director. And as you can imagine, as the budget director, first responsibility is to build this budget, to put it all together. She's working with all of the information she has from the budget documentation that we provide, which I would argue is the best in any school district, and the detail that we provide, and the knowledge and experience that Pat brought to us has made us even better in what we do. She has been here on weekends. She's been here right through the holidays in order to get this together, to build it for you, for the community, for all of us, so that we can understand how our resources are being used on behalf of our children in the system, our staff, our buildings, caring for everything that we are charged to be good stewards and leaders of. Pat, you did a spectacular job in putting this together, and I want to say thank you. Of course, Pat didn't do it alone. I also want to say a special thank you to Sean. Sean O'Keefe has been our Director of Finance Operations now only in his second year. Hard to believe. It's like he's been here much longer than that. But as you go through these cycles and build these budgets, again, it's so precise. It takes time, and it can take years to understand and to learn. And together, Sean and Pat have been an outstanding team, and they've done an amazing job building this for us and doing this work. Of course, I also want to say thanks to our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Correnti, our Assistant Superintendent for Pupil and Family Services, Mr. Tesber, our Director of Human Resources, Darlene Pianca. I think we have the best team in baseball. And I feel blessed to have such amazing colleagues that I get to work with every day. Our budget is built from the ground up. Years ago, there used to be conversations about just adding an inflator and moving things forward. We would never do that. We don't believe in that because of the conversations that we've had leading up till even now, which is a budget is not a spreadsheet. It is really a values statement. It's a document that's reflective of who we are, what we believe, and where our priorities are. And so it's our principals and our program leaders who do that work in their organization, in their sub-organizations within our system. So I want to say thanks to, and they're here tonight, I want to say thanks to Bill Egan, our high school principal, Dave Gussich over at the middle school, Jan Murphy over at West, Chris Wolick over at East, our final budget, and Matt Kaskak, who can't be here with us tonight, and so Zoe is here for Matt. I also want to say thanks to Rana Van Vagel and Pam Gennario, who are here with us tonight. Ron, as you know, is the NCEA president. Pam is the vice president, and they care so much that they're here with us tonight instead of watching the national championship. And of course, it's also our program managers, Dan Clark is here with facilities. Thank you, Dan. And others, Michelle Santelli, Roy Walder, who's home asleep because he's the earliest first person to arrive on district every single day. Michelle Santelli follows him in the morning. So they are, they're put their heart and soul into what we're about to discuss. And special thanks to them in McEwen Technology as well. So as you can tell, I'm very proud of what we've given you tonight to begin our discussion, and really looking forward to what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks as we get our hands into it and have our discussions together. The work that we've done leading up till now has mostly been internal, as you know. We start in October working with our teachers, working with our different programs, hearing from them what's working, what's not, where their needs are, what ideas they may have for initiatives. We're doing this around all things, whether it's technology, textbooks, whatever it might be. And it's led by the central office staff. It's managed by our principals and program leaders on the ground. And this is where it's sort of top down, bottom up. And we build those things together, culminates into the workshop that we had together in January, and now into this initial presentation of the superintendent's proposal. So as you take a look, that's the first thing here is our budget workshop from December. And now we are sort of our second official formal meeting, although, as you know, it's been months of preparation to get to this point that we have in front of you now. After tonight, tomorrow morning, first thing, I'll be over at East School at 9:30. It was moved to 9:15 last year, which I was told at 9:16 last year. So it's 9:30. And I'll be sharing just an update with folks that are there, elementary parents and others, and be able to have a Q&A, some conversation back and forth. Wednesday morning, I'll be here with our SACs and high school, PTC and PFA, to have a similar conversation and talk about some things. In those conversations, I narrow it down a little bit to be specific to those levels. So I'll talk more about elementary initiatives tomorrow morning, more about secondary initiatives on Wednesday morning. Then, as a group, we'll be coming together again, as I mentioned, on Tuesday of next week at 5:30. We're planning to do that over at 220 Elm, and we'll have our budget workshop where we can together work through all the ins and outs and specifics around the budget with the board. Beyond that, we have our next Board of Education meeting scheduled for January 22nd, which we'll have here, further discussion, and we look at that point to move the budget into the Board of Education's budget instead of the superintendent's proposal. Because then, soon on the heels of that meeting, by charter, we go over to the Board of Selectmen, and we will be sharing the Board of Education's budget with the Board of Selectmen on the morning of the 25th. And what the Board of Selectmen does with the budget is really focus on capital. They take the operating budget, they can give us feedback if they like, but they don't vote on our budget from the Board of Selectmen's office. What they do is give us feedback around capital, put the package together, and then move it on to the Board of Finance. And so once it goes over to the Board of Finance on February 6th, we'll present the Board of Education's budget to them then, and then engage in a series of back and forths and meetings. These are the formal meetings. There are other meetings that are with the liaisons and other conversations that we'll have along the way, all building towards that March 7th date of the vote, where the Board of Finance then accepts the budget as Board of Education's budget, and then takes it and hands it off to the Town Council, where we'll have another presentation March 12th, have the same process of back and forth and conversation with them, all building towards that April 2nd date of the final vote on the budget. And I'm always glad when it doesn't fall on April 1st. On that Tuesday. So you see, we begin in October as we're having our conversations, and it goes all the way through April. Now, we're doing lots of other things at the same time. But really now for the next 2 weeks or so with the Board of Education, this absolutely is our top priority. So as we go through, we may not have opportunity for extensive back and forth tonight, but I would encourage you to send any questions to me and or to Hugo. We'll get those together and we'll use those as the basis for our discussion as we spring into the workshop on the 16th. Of course, you're always welcome to reach out as well if you have other questions or quick clarifications that would be helpful. But the question and answer that we do together, I think really in the past has been successful in getting towards that understanding. Because again, we're looking at $108, $109 million budget with thousands of line items and hundreds of specific objects and other things. It's the thousands of expenditures that roll up into hundreds and hundreds of lines, which roll up into different categories and ultimately get into the 8 large objects that we're going to talk to. It's complex. It takes some time. So we want to do everything we can to make sure you feel confident as we work through this. And we are absolutely open to ideas and best ways to improve along the way. So as we just get started and consider the budget, it's important to begin by considering our district's goals. They guide our work, so therefore they guide our resource plan, and they truly are our true north in the planning process. We think about who we are, where we're going. It's a Yogi Berra quote, I think, right? If you don't know where you're going, you just might wind up somewhere else. We know where we're going. Our goals help us to continue moving forward and going where we intend to be. So goal 1 is focused on teaching and learning. It's a student-centered goal, student-based and driven outcomes. Goal 2, on communication, and how communication is a means through which we improve service and relationships across the district. Goal number 3 is on exemplary instructional practice, because we know the most important work that happens in our school district every day is the exchange between teacher, student, and content. That instructional core is our focus. And goal 3 speaks to the quality of that interaction in the instructional core in our classrooms. Goal 4 is focused on school climate and safety. And as the board's aware, we've done quite a bit with safety through the years, and we continue to make investments there on behalf of our kids. And goal 5 is on stewardship of all of our resources, whether it's financial, human capital, facilities, all of what we have in the district. It's our responsibility to be good stewards of every single thing there. And so we take, again, that responsibility very, very seriously. Our goals themselves have been consistent and stable through the years. Again, that's what helps us to consistently move forward in important ways. What changes through the years are those indicators underneath, the ways in which we actualize those goals. But the 5 themselves help to make sure that we are always keeping our focus where it matters most. And that sustained focus and commitment has provided a roadmap for the success that we've experienced through the years. So a couple of things when I think about success. I always like to begin a budget conversation thinking about what have our investments yielded recently. And we'll go back last year, let me talk a little bit more about some other things, but really focusing just in the recent past, sort of what the investments that we've made in our school district, and I do consider it investments, what's the return on those investments, right? So what are they? KPI, key performance indicators, to use as we think about these things. One, of course, all of you were involved in some degree or another, most of you involved throughout the entire time, the portrait of the graduate. That work that we did together in identifying those core competencies and dispositions for every graduate of the New Canaan Public Schools was important work at the time, and we intended to be a springboard for some transformational work going forward. The cover, as I mentioned, is a first look at that graphic, which we spent some time talking about, and there were definitely a variety of different editions. This is probably version 7, maybe, of sort of what we're doing with that. And we did, as a nod to our football team in their back-to-back state championship, we did put them in the lower right-hand corner. We'll switch that out and be a little more fan-based, I think, but we couldn't resist. And but the idea here is celebrating student success and focusing on their evolution through our system, which is the visual that's there. And of course, that picture, 1 or 2 of you may even be in it, is of one of the 4 work sessions that we had together. Another very significant undertaking and accomplishment is right upstairs in this high school and the dome, the work that was done with the dome. It was really our first foray as a district that I'm aware of into a public-private partnership like that. So the Board of Finance initially approved $350,000 towards the project with the goal of privately fundraising another $350,000, which, thanks to Sarah Schubert and a number of others, some of you were on those committees, they were in a year able to pull that funding together, do that fundraising, and really get people excited around the vision of what the old planetarium could turn into as the dome. When that fell a little bit short, they got to the $350,000, but the prices went up. Lots of reasons why, including labor costs, some things that happened. The Board of Finance stepped in, filled that gap, and made them whole. So right now, the dome is functioning. It is ready. We've got some students that have already used it, some teachers that have gone in there. We'll have a grand opening sometime in early March, and we might even try to sneak in a showing prior to that. But it's exciting. It's more than exciting. Again, I'm going to use this word maybe too much tonight, but I do believe it provides for transformational opportunities for our kids. Full disclosure, the cabinet snuck in there and watched a show, and it was incredibly powerful. I can't wait for you to see it. I can't wait for our kids to see it. We've gone from that dots on a dome to truly, it's an immersive virtual reality experience that you have collectively with the people around you. So, it's so different than putting on goggles saying going in a virtual reality world. You literally are collectively experiencing a virtual reality that can transport you anywhere in time, space, anywhere your imagination can go. So truly amazing stuff. I can't imagine that anything like this exists. Nothing exists like this that I know of in any high school anywhere. So just to think about what it's going to mean for our kids and our community is really, really inspiring. So that's something to be very, very proud of. Something else to be very, very proud of is the continued success of our students in athletics. Again, we invest in athletics across at the high school. We only have a high school program. We don't have a middle school program. That is all town run. But once again, our students performed incredibly well. Our football team was 12-1, and that one was the very first game of the season. They were the Class L champions, so back-to-back state champions, and the Turkey Bowl champions for the 7th consecutive year, which is really hard to believe because obviously Turkey Bowl, we're playing Darien. Darien has great teams that are competing for the state championship every year. And I know several of you were there at the game and enjoyed that with us. But it's not just football, right? It's field hockey, 13-1, Class M runner-up. It's the girls cross country, Class L state champions, FCAC runners-up. Boys swim and dive, Class L state champions. Girls outdoor track, they were the FCAC runners-up, Class L champions. And then girls lacrosse, 18-4, runners-up in the FCAC and in Class L, and they're end of the season ranked 10th in the United States. It's really, really impressive stuff. Also, can't help it, right? What a great shot. There's also individual accomplishments of note, right? So in diving, in field hockey, we had a first team all-state game time by Game Time TV. In football, we had a player, Alex Benevento. He's all-state in the New Haven Register, top 28 in the CHSCA. He was all FCAC. He was the New York Jets Player of the Week. Another football student, Miles, all-state New Haven Register, all FCAC. Another football player, all-state New Haven Register. These are recent awards, but it goes on and on. So our teams perform incredibly well, and our individual students do as well. And the same can be said about our VPA program, where we've got individual performers and group performances that really are stunning and points of pride, I think, for all of us involved with the New Canaan Public Schools. For instance, in art, the Connecticut Art Education Association awarded 10 New Canaan High School students in photography, printmaking, drawing and illustration. The high school had 3 gold key winners, 6 silver key winners, and 1 honorable mention. These are all adjudicated competitions that they're submitting their work into. Additionally, the Rye Arts Center's 2nd annual Ground Glass Student Photography International, it's a mouthful, but they chose works from several of our students to display while mentioning 8 others in their program, an honorable mention. This drawing here is by Kaylee Marty. It's entitled Hospital Ball Machine, another award winner. Again, 2 students were selected for the annual I Create High School Art Show. Again, 2 more award winners from our students. Truly, truly, they're so talented. The one on the left is Finding the Light by Ann Gilliam, and the other is a pencil drawing titled Limbo by Alexandra Gelvin. And they're guided by our VPA department from all the way through the grades, right up through here at the high school. Of course, VPA is more than art. It's also theater. And in theater, we've had another incredible year this past year. The participation in theater is something that, again, is a point of pride for all of us. There are hundreds of students involved with all of our productions, that right from the lower division at Saks all the way through. We're the only school I know of that does 6 performances at the high school level. We will do 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. They do drama, they do musical, they do student written and directed performances throughout the year. It's truly embedded in the culture of the school as well. And there's also competitions for that. So, for instance, is the Halo.
Halo goes to New Canaan.
This is last year's Halo Awards, where our students won Best Performance by Featured Actors, Best Featured Dancers, Best Performance by Leading Actor, and this one, Best Classical Musical. I know the Golden Globes were last night. Our kids are more excited there than anyone who won a Golden Globe. And so these things matter to our kids. These investments pay off. These things make a difference in the lives of our students. Students also auditioned and were accepted to the Connecticut Music Educators Association festivals over this past year. We had 9 students who were accepted into the CMEA Middle School Western Regional, 5 more for CMEA Elementary, 15 for the CME Middle School Western Regional Band and Orchestra, 12 more of the high school choir performed at the American Choral Directors Association, 13 students for the CMEA Western Regional Choir, 2 all-national choirs for students, 9 others in the Connecticut All-State Choir, and our chorus, our concert choir, actually performed at Radio City to open for the Rockettes' Christmas Spectacular this year. So they went down to New York and they performed on the stage and warmed them up for the Rockettes who came later. Another way that our students are distinguishing themselves are also through their work in video production. Right? We've talked for a while, years, about the video production at the high school and the amazing work that they're doing. Turns out students are doing the same work now in our elementary schools and in our middle schools. As a matter of fact, the Cable Council, they have awards annually. And there's one, the most prestigious award is called the Rapicki Award, and it honors the best overall project at each level, the elementary, the middle, and the high school. And we won all 3. At the high school level, it's Platon, which is about the photographer Platon, which is brilliant. If you go to Jen Sinsky's Digication site, you can see that documentary about the photographer. Saks, it was the news broadcast that they put out on the outdoor space when they opened up their outdoor learning center, came in first place. And then the elementary school, I'm just going to show you this for a moment, it was the Tri-State Welcome, which was put together by our very own Rana Van Vagel and her students to welcome our Tri-State Consortium visitors.
Hi, we are 4th graders from South School, and we would like to welcome you to the New Canaan Public Schools. We understand that you are coming to learn more about how we support well-being in our schools, and we are so excited that you are here. We have learned a lot about well-being and emotional intelligence over the past few years, and we thought it would be helpful to you if we share a few tips for your visit. The first important thing is to know and understand what you are feeling, because then you can use a strategy to feel better. In New Canaan, we use the mood meter to help us understand and talk about our feelings. You have to name it to tame it.
Yes, like you might feel stressed to be away from your job for a few days. It can be hard to juggle being here and at the same time having everyone texting, emailing you, and calling you from your school. You might even feel in the red.
One thing that helps me when I start to feel people are asking me to do too many things at once is positive self-talk. This just means you say nice things to yourself. You could tell yourself something like, they're going to be okay without me, or I don't have to solve this, or it is okay if I take some time away from work. Someone else will cover it for me. This will help you worry less.
Another thing that might be hard for you all this week is looking through all of that tri-state evidence our teachers have been working so hard on.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. You can see why they won first place. So those are our elementary kids. Imagine what they're going to be doing by the time they get into the middle school, they get into the high school, and they start producing original content to be displayed on our immersive dome here at the high school. Really amazing stuff. We also, in the investments that we make, focus on student opportunities. So what else for students? We've talked about athletics, we've talked about VPA. What about that student who's not engaged or who has other interests? That's where we have our extensive co-curricular program as well. And you see, this is just a snapshot of some. It's not even all inclusive. But one of the great things about our school, the way that it works, is that the students come up with an idea for something. They come to an adult, they talk to the teachers and say, would you be interested or willing to be my advisor for this club? And as long as the teacher says yes, and they generally do, they can get a club off the ground. Great example of that is the bee club. There was a couple of students who were interested in beekeeping. They just wanted to try it. They had no experience with it. They wanted to try it. They spoke with one of our teachers who thought it sounded cool. So he had never done it. So together they learned how to do it. They started doing it and started keeping bees. Things like that. That's the kind of environment that we foster here in the district. That's what our kids are able to do. And that's the support we provide them to be able to just explore those things. We also have a great Model UN program that we've talked about. Right now, as a matter of fact, we have a delegation at The Hague they are the only public school in the country invited to participate in this international delegation, as an international delegation at The Hague for the Model UN program internationally. So they're there, about a dozen kids, with faculty chaperones representing New Canaan and participating in a United Nations-like experience at The Hague in the Netherlands with people from all over the world. What an amazing experience for our kids. Now, all of that's incredibly important, and so is this, right? Our academic outcomes continue to be among the very best in the state, certainly in our demographic reference group, and statewide. These are the results from the 2023 Smarter Balanced Assessment, the SBAC. And you see, first we started the high level, just rolling everything up, and you see our performance there in both English language arts and in mathematics. Going a little bit deeper, so these assessments are taken from starting grade 3 right up through grade 8. You see our performance and the performance across the DERG, and our students performed at the top of the DERG and top of the state in 4 of those 6 grade levels. I thought this was interesting just in part. I don't want to take us off course, but in all the conversation about reading programs and reading waivers, I just wanted to go a little bit deeper to say, this is our performance across the board since 2016. And really what you're seeing is performance mid-80s and up for the most part across the board. And these are students who have met or exceeded the goal. So it's a level 3 or a level 4. And there's an awful lot here for our district to be proud of. And this really speaks to the work of our teachers with our students in the classroom. It speaks to our work with RTI. You've heard us talk about RTI before, response to intervention. What do we do when students aren't getting it? How do we respond and provide those interventions that they need in order to take that next step and to get it? And I think that it's important to note that when you're in the low 90s and the high 80s, you are really performing at a level that few can say. And our goal is always 100%. We want 100% of our students to get to that level 3. And we're not satisfied until they are. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be proud of the outcomes that we are getting and recognize all of the amazing work that goes into it from our teachers, to our interventionists, to our administrators, our classroom evaluators, everything that's happening there, the entire system all working together. And it's also an important nod to our special education department. If we have 93% of our students meeting goal, and if we're running at about 12, 14% of our students are in special education, it really, again, speaks to everyone working together, rowing in the same direction and believing that every single student can be successful. And I think that really, again, speaks to who we are as a district. We flip over to math. Similarly, our overall performance in math last year, 82, 83%, 82.9, puts us at the top of the state and of the region. And if we break that down a little bit further and we look across the grade levels, again, we're at the top of the state, top of the DERG in the majority of those grades from 3 to 8. We also started with our next generation science standards, NGSS assessments. And again, it's just important to take a quick look at this. This is our science and the work that Melinda Meyer, as our Director of Innovation, has been doing. You know, when we transitioned that position from a curriculum coordinator position into that administrative position, she also assumed the evaluation responsibilities for our science department. And that has really paid great dividends, because to have a content expert doing those classroom evaluations and working with those content specialists really helps to align everything and to keep it moving in the right direction around those standards. So just again, on the longitudinal look at our performance for our Smarter Balanced, as you look across, you know, again, consistently strong, high results, and we're not satisfied. We want to keep getting better and better, but there's a lot to be proud of here and grateful for the good work of everybody doing this. We also, as we get up into the high school, we've got other assessments that we talk about and look at. Our SAT results, this is from the school day SAT, which they started years ago. Our performance with our students continues to be strong, with towards the top in reading and writing and at the top in mathematics in the state and across the DERG. And the SAT is, there was actually a piece in the New York Times today about the SAT and about standardized assessments in higher ed. There's quite a bit of conversation still going on around the value of SAT and higher ed and all of that, but it still is a reliable indicator for us to take a look at, and our performance is continuing to improve there. I think this is one of the more important things to talk about, though, when we think about the high school program and we think about how it has grown and improved through the years. There are multiple data points here, so I'm just going to take a moment to just touch base on them. The grayed out bars in the back, that's our total student population. So it starts at 1282, and in 2010, and in 2023, it's at 1294, right? So you're talking about 12 student difference from 2010 to 2023. In between, though, those 13 years, the green bar is the performance on the AP assessments, so student test results. And that's the percentage of students, or percentage of tests, that are at a 3 or better. And on the advanced placement tests, as you likely know, a 3 or better denotes college level work, right? So that's required in order for it to be transferred in or be considered successful. The blue line is the number of test takers. So when we had 1282 students in 2010, there were 275 test takers. In 2023, there are 12 more students, but more than twice the number of test takers. Well, almost twice the number of test takers, from 275 up to 505. So that speaks to the expansion of the program. It speaks to the reduction or elimination of barriers to entry for kids. It speaks to us preparing them, helping them to succeed at that higher level of coursework. Because again, if you look back to the green bar, you see that our performance has actually increased through the years as more students have gotten into the program, which we know, we've seen data that supports that. That helps us before we make this leap and before we really expand the program, but it's powerful to see it truly play out in the school with our kids right here. And then if you look at the red, which may be the most telling of all, it's the number of tests taken, right? Because an individual student might take 1 or 2 or 3 tests. So the blue is the number of kids, the red is the number of tests. And again, there's only 12 more students in 23 than there was in 10. But we've gone from 497 tests taken to over 1,200 tests taken in that period of time. And so all of that is about increasing the opportunity for our students to engage in the most challenging coursework, the highest level coursework, while they're here as students in New Canaan Public Schools. Our goal is to prepare them in all ways for what's to come next. And having a diverse catalog of AP courses and opportunities helps us to make sure that every student is prepared. Back in 2010, we had a limited program for those, your traditional high school student. So it was your AP US, it was AP Bio, all important courses, but all narrowly focused specific. Now we've broadened that to have things such as AP micro macroeconomics, we have AP psychology, we have environmental science, we have much more, a broader catalog so that students can find themselves in the program, find their interests, and engage in that work, again, at that highest possible level. So lots of credit goes to the high school, to the school counselors, to the department chairs, and to Dr. Krenti, Mr. Egan, everybody who's really focused on providing the maximum number of opportunities for kids to give them those chances to learn at these levels. And again, to do all of this and maintain or improve your outcomes on the scores of the assessments really speaks to the quality of that experience that we're providing for our kids. So with all of that, I think it's also important just to take a step back and to see how we're doing with some external measures. And I think that I've said this from the beginning when Niche started, I think that they take a more holistic view than most of these systems, and I find them to be more reliable, probably because we do well with their rankings. But as you see, statewide, we've been ranked the #2 best public school district in Connecticut, with the #1 high school, #4 middle school, and then 1, 3, and 5 across the elementary schools. Pretty stunning stuff when you take a look at it. But then when you go down to the national recognition, right, and really I put top 1%, but it's really the top 0.5% when you look at the numbers. Being ranked 48 out of close to 11,000 public school districts across the United States. 31 districts with the best teachers. And again, I think that probably should be #1, but that's just me. Out of 11,466. 56 best places to teach. 35 out of 10,346 best school districts for student athletes. Again, this is the result of the investment, the work, the passion, the commitment. It starts with the board, it flows to the administration, goes right through the community, through the parents, the expectations that we all have for ourselves, for each other, and ultimately the aspirations that we have for our kids. Now, this is a budget conversation, so we do have to get into some numbers. And of course, with all of that great success, I'm sure you're thinking, wow, this must be really expensive. And certainly it takes an investment. However, I think it's helpful to understand the investment by comparison across our, again, demographic reference group. We look across the state. And I added a couple in, just Greenwich as someone nearby and a point of comparison that people tend to make. So Connecticut has a couple of ways that they look at the expenditures in schools. And as you know, we have a standardized reporting system that we have to use now at the end of each fiscal year. And we talk about that when we went into our first meeting in September. And we look at the filing and we have our annual review. We're audited with the town every year. And we go through those audits with them. We have the educational cost filing that we need to do, the EFS. And those are based, there's a standardization in that across the state to be sure that these comparisons are fair, that they're normed. Because the numbers that are here, the net current expenditures per pupil, and this is all available online. I'm happy to talk about it offline anytime if you want to get a little deeper into it. But those numbers are very important because the net current expenditure per pupil determines the threshold for your excess cost reimbursement for high-cost special education students. So that number times 4.5 becomes your threshold. Everything below that is ineligible for reimbursement from the state for high-cost students that everyone has them. Anything above that is reimbursable. So the number has to be normed and carefully vetted because there's a lot on the line here. So, $1,000 here and there could mean significant money to a district. So there's great care taken to get this right. Through the years, we've moved from where we were in the mid-20s or so to move into, as you see, mid-40s. So we're 44th in the state. If you were just to rank from 1 to 166, we're 44. And you see there are others around us. And there is definitely a bias against very small districts because they still have to pay to turn the lights on, they have to pay for all those things, so the number's smaller there. But when you look at a Greenwich, Westport, Darien, Wilton, similar sized districts. And there's plenty of others that are here. But just for instance, if this year in 23-24, we were spending the same per pupil as Greenwich is this year, and that's per student, so this is normalized by the number of students that we have, we'd be spending an additional $15.3 million in this year's budget. If it was Westport, it'd be an additional $7.5 million. Darien, it would be an additional $4.3 million. Okay. Or Wilton, an additional 1.2. So I bring this up and spend a little time on it because I'm very proud of the efficiencies that we're able to find. And I've said this multiple times, but I think it's worth repeating, that it really, one of our goals, one of the things we truly work really hard to do is to identify ways to manage the operational costs, the things like turning the lights on, the energy, the power, those things, heating the buildings, all of those things, so that we can continue to invest in the classrooms, keep the money where the kids are. If we can pay less for power, let's do it. The lights are going to be on, as long as they are, so that the money, whatever the savings is, can go towards our kids. That's the value proposition, right? That's using the funding that we have in the best possible way. And the ANGLIC on the far right, that column, ANGLIC stands for Adjusted Equalized Net Grand List per capita. It's essentially your wealth ranking, right? So that's your total grand list per capita in each of the towns. Greenwich has the highest ANGLIC. So it's the total grand list divided by the population, essentially, as we look at it. Greenwich is 1, they're the wealthiest town in the state. Darien is 2, we're the 3rd. So when we think about this a little bit, it's sort of that ANGLIC is your ability to pay. And then your NCEP is what you actually are paying. So I see this as being, we're in a great position here in how we've supported our schools and the funding that we've used. Now, I wish I could say, here's the magic bullet, if everyone just does this one thing. It's not. What we have are the results of years and years and years of little small changes that reverberate through the system. Again, I mentioned energy. Energy is a big thing. And you'll see our utilities are actually trending down when we look into next year, which is, again, stunning. I don't think that's happening anywhere. And that's because of the investments that we've made through the years. Those things add up. Those little things, big things. Some of the things that I'm most proud of are these environmentally friendly changes that we've made in the district that save us money and also help the environment. Things like bringing natural gas to 4 of our 5 buildings. That helps. It brings down the cost, burns cleaner. It also helps us in that it doesn't, the soot is reduced in the burners themselves, in the boilers, so they burn cleaner, they need less maintenance, they last longer. All of those things become virtuous cycles. Propane. 100% of our bus fleet has been burning propane for the last few years. It actually makes me a little nuts because they're talking about an incentive to move to electric buses that you can only get if you're currently using diesel. And we moved away from diesel because we knew it was bad in lots of ways. So I'm lobbying to be eligible for those incentives when the time comes because we've done good doesn't mean we shouldn't be incentivized to do better. And so we're working on that. But that propane shift, again, it burns clean, less wear and tear on the vehicles. And it results in positive things. For instance, our buses that we purchased that burn propane, they found they're burning cleaner, less wear and tear on the engines. They're lasting longer. That was part of why we got a 2% renewal for the next 5 years with our bus company. Instead of having to replace the buses out because of diesel or other things happening and the wear and tear on the engines, these are burning clean enough we can continue using the same ones. So we save that money. We didn't know that was going to happen in the beginning, but that's part of that virtuous cycle I'm talking about. It saves us just a little bit of money, and then there's practical things about it. So in the past, if the temperature was going to be below a certain level, you had to leave the diesel engines running overnight or they wouldn't start in the morning. Propane's under pressure. You can go down to negative 50 degrees, give or take. I think it's 47. And it'll start right up. So you don't have to do that. So you're not burning all night, running those engines all night, doing those things. So little things I laugh sometimes these are the things you get excited about as a superintendent, but it all adds up to, I think, to savings. And some good decisions along the way. Solar, another example. We started with solar years ago. We started over at South. We, instead of buying them through a capital outlay, we used a power purchase agreement. The board was very involved in vetting all of that, and we're continuing to do that. That saves us an enormous amount of money and is good for the environment. Again, we generated over 1.2 million kilowatts last year. And that doesn't include the high school, which also had a few, I think, but at those buildings, and we're not done with Saks. What we generated is enough to power over 110 homes for an entire year. That's what we put into the grid off our solar panels last year. And we paid anywhere 4.5, 6 cents or so per kilowatt through those PPAs that we have. So we paid much less, well below market, while pumping this energy into the grid and taking some other fossil fuel burning energy out of the grid. And I think that's doing good, doing well, and it's good for our budget. We've worked with combined heat and power. We have a plant over at Saks right now, and essentially it is a little power plant. It burns natural gas, generates electricity that feeds in. It also generates hot water that goes through the system and saves us money on that as well, because that hot water is being put to use. And we're even experimenting or exploring ways, maybe there's even ways to cool the building in the summer using the energy and what's happening with the CHP. So that's a new one for us, but we're figuring that out too. And if that all goes well, we'll look to move that over to the high school. And again, it reduces our carbon footprint. And then the LED lighting retrofit. When we were all in school, we had fluorescent lights, and they would start flickering when they started to die, and they'd come in and they'd replace them out. And one at a time, we'd have to do that. So you have the cost of replacements and the energy it takes to power fluorescent and all that. We moved to LED lights that typically last 10 years. So the replacement costs are way down, and they burn a fraction of the energy. And it may not mean that much when it's your home. It might save you a couple of bucks or whatever it might be. But we have close to 1 million square feet of space. And when you have that kind of scale, a change like this can equal over $200,000 a year in savings. So it's all of those kinds of things that add up. So as hopefully you can tell, I think we've worked hard. There's a lot more work to do, but it all sort of builds to the conversation around the request for this New Year's budget. So as we get into it, there are several themes that will resonate throughout as you look throughout the book and understand the budget and how it all works. One, of course, is to continue to meet the community's expectations of excellence and to balance that with our focus and commitment on efficiency. Ultimately, to continue to provide that world-class experience for our kids, because that's really what we're here for. That's what the community expects of us. That's what we expect of ourselves. That's what drives us every day and what we're doing. The staffing across the board, we'll get into enrollment in a moment, certainly drives all of the budget. And we'll get into what we call the big five in a little bit here. But over 82% of our budget is salaries and benefits, right? 82%. So we'll spend some time talking about that. Of course, other budget drivers are health insurance, transportation, utilities, out of district. And we work very hard to manage each and every one of those very carefully. Enrollment is steady for the most part. So some staffing changes are driven really programmatically, but we'll start by looking at the high level, and then we'll drill in just a bit. So I hesitate to even put this on a slide. It's a terrible slide. You shouldn't really even look at it, but it's just the best way to give that overview. This is the budget, the whole budget, a one-pager. And I mentioned before the objects. There are 8 objects in a Board of Education budget. That's salaries, benefits, contracted services, property services, purchase services, supplies, equipment, and other. So 8 objects. Everything rolls up into one of those 8 objects. So salaries is self-explanatory. Benefits, that's our internal services fund and our health insurance benefits, but it's also some other benefits that are part of it. And you'll see that, and I'll show you how you get to that. All in, as you look across and you see from 2021 up till now, 2025 requested, we're looking at, it's that $109,765,000. It's a 6.5% year-to-year shift. Now, we thought it would be helpful and informative for the board to see what it looks like if we remove the ISF. because that ISF is a big number, and you can see that up above. It's going up 16.6%, given the challenges, things that we're facing here. So if we pull that out entirely, it changes our base from 109 to 91.8, and then it's a 4.34% change year to year. Right? So sometimes people will say, well, without the insurance, it's a lower number than that 4.3, but you have to remove all of it out of the base, or it's not a fair calculation because it skews the number. You all know that. Surprised other people don't necessarily know that. So another way to look at it, I was trying to think about some context for you. We took the actuals from 2009, which were 89,763,488, and the two trend lines here. The orangish one is if we just trended it with inflation. And granted, our school year budget is not on an annual budget necessarily, or it's not annual, it's July 1 to June 30th. Inflation is calculated annually, so it's a little tricky, but I just used the 2019 inflation number of 2.3, 2020 was 1.4, 21 7.0, 22 6.5, 23 3.1. So I got that right off the government website that tracks all the inflation numbers, and then just assumed a 3% in 24 and 25. Glad to go through the calculation more, but it's just the visualization simply is this, that just following inflation, we have trended below that line right through. And you see, we're sort of correcting for that a bit. Part of that is savings through the pandemic and otherwise. We're not able to run programs that we had and things, but it does cumulatively add up to just up to 2023, where we actually have those inflation numbers, $17 million below those couple of years since 2019. So I think it just, again, speaks to the stewardship, the care that we take as we're working our budget, and probably in part speaks to why those comparisons are what they are when we look across some of the other districts in our region, right? And their spending. I mentioned sort of the big five that drive the budget. It's salaries, benefits, out-of-district tuition, transportation, and utilities. I mean, really, if you look at those five large items, they are 93% of the budget. And in the year-to-year change, they account for 96.5% of the year-to-year change. Right? So those really are those big items, and you can see those below. And Sean, in a little bit, Sean will go into a little more detail about how that all works, right? Visually, another way to look at it, the breakdown. If you look, the salaries, again, over 60% are salaries. Combined with benefits, it's 82+%. Purchase services, that's where you have your transportation, and then the out-of-district placements, and then utilities are in purchase services. And then everything else, it sort of makes up that difference. Another way to look at it, so those are the objects, and that helps to understand it, but it really is it's a very high level to look at things. We can also look at it by cost center. And that's where our program managers and each individual building and others get involved. So I like to look at it as by cost center like this because it shows me a couple of things. One, across the elementary schools, you see parity, right? So the East is a little bit larger because their student population is a little bit larger, but not by much really at all. And actually the budgets are built collaboratively by the principals across all three schools. So there's a lot of partnership and collegiality there. We look at SACs in the high school. Both of those are 4 grades, right? So you've got 5 through 8 and 9 through 12. And again, you see parity there. In athletics, you see athletics, VPA, and curriculum instruction. We see our special education, which goes across all grades K through 12. And that's, again, their distribution of spend. PPS is pupil services. Those would be our school counselors and others. Technology, innovation. You can't really see innovation, it's too thin. But the district admin, facilities, transportation, and others. Each of those is a cost center. Each of those has somebody who sort of manages, supervises that budget. And again, it all rolls up. The book itself is broken out by cost center, because I think that once you get into the details of it, that makes the most sense in understanding it. The beginning, the overview, of course, is the whole thing based on object as you look at it. Okay. I mentioned salaries drives the budget, and so our staffing plan starts the budget book. When you go into that book, you'll see those first pages in it talk specifically about our current staffing and proposed staffing. And when we look at this year into next, we're looking at a slight change, or a change of 5.7 FTEs. Part of that is that the ESSER grants that we've had for the last couple of years are all ending. So as we go into the FY25 budget, the funding's no longer available for those ESSER grants. It's not that we had an awful lot as a district, but we used it, I think, incredibly well. And we did things such as investing in personnel for students for their mental health, for student support. We did run the Summer Achievement Academy. We had some other investments that we had made. We had to make decisions around this. Which positions do we support in the budget? Are there some that we let go? And we did have to let a few go, just given sort of prioritization. It's what we do when we're building a budget. There's limited funds for us to work with. But the ending of those grants, if it's a little over $1 million, adds to our costs here as well. Think about enrollment. This is our projected district enrollment going forward. So 2023 up through for the next 10 years to 2033. And you see consistent, and then it starts to move up in that 26, 27 year, and then continues that upward climb. This is a first shot, but what's more telling, I think, is when you look at it by level. And this together is historical and projected enrollments across the grades, the elementary, and then the middle and the high school. And you see, so where we were higher in the 13, 14, 15 in the elementary, and then trending down a little bit. You see right in the middle is the 23, 24, that's our current year, and you see the elementary trending up. At the same time, where that dip occurred for the elementary, that's what sort of ripples into, you see the high school and the middle school going down a little bit, which is the why that shift in the facilities charter makes good sense. So that climb in the elementary is something that we have to take a look at and plan for. For next year, we look at those section totals across east, south, and west. You see that east will continue running 6 sections per grade. South has a little bit of a shift with going down a section in first grade, up a section in second, and then down a section in fourth. And then west is staying the same with 5 across the board. That really puts east at 30 sections, puts west at 25 sections, and it puts south at 26 sections. And the thing with west at 25 is that we have 5 other classrooms that are used for our pre-K. So they're really running at 30. We've talked before about the challenges at the elementary school when they run at 30. As you know, we've got really a great world-class science program that has science teachers who start right away with our elementary students, and they are taught by science specialists. When we get to 30, we lose space for some of that work, and we have to do more in the classroom, and we have less opportunity to do the way that we want to do it, which is, again, why I think that facilities committee is an important group to come together, and I'm thrilled that the board approved it tonight. And I've already started some conversations with some folks to get people lined up to help that group doing their work, a consultant who can help with some conversations. So we'll get off the ground quickly. But as you look across, that's a -1 on balance with South. And then at Saks, if you look across the top row, you see the projected enrollment across those grades. And we have a large group leaving 4th grade going into 5th grade over at Saks. So that's that 352. So it's bringing us up to 16 sections there in the 5th grade, which will put that average on that last row. Average class size is at 22. Now, we had a question to work through, and we've made a decision at this point to have our sections at 6th grade remaining at 16, which puts us at the 18.4 class size average. And then 7th grade, the 16, 8th grade at 16 as well. Really across the board, when you look, just about every grade has 16 sections, except for that 2nd grade, which is up to 17. Right? So, and then those average class size across the bottom. The Board of Education class size guidelines are K3 are 16 to 20, grades 4 through 8 are 20 to 24. However, we've made a concerted effort we've always, in the past, we always strove to be between 18 and 20 with our elementary. Recently, given the challenges that we've all had and our kids have had, we're looking more like 17 to 19, trying to hit there. But given where these fall in the mid-18s or so, really across the board, across the elementary, we feel comfortable with this plan. We think it's the right staffing plan for our district across the board. And we don't have what we've called an enrollment variability position. In the past, we've had some times where the projected numbers would break, sometimes right at 20, for instance, in a second grade. And so we would budget towards that to get to the 20 with a realization that if we go 1 or 2 kids over, we're going to need another section. So we would put in what's called an enrollment variability adjustment. Because these are really in the middle of the range, we decided we don't need an enrollment variability adjustment this year. Knock on wood. And we're comfortable going forward with what we have. Over at Saks, that +2 actually turns into a 2.4, because when you're going up 2 more classrooms, you have to do something with your specials as well. So there's a little bit of additional time that we'll talk about in a moment. But you see the balance. You also see here one of the strengths of the team model that's over at Saks. So it flexes up or down. So whether you're at 294 students or 352 students, you still can stick with the 16 staff members and keep your teams together, 4 teams of 4. Or in the 5th grade, it's actually 8 teams of 2, right? But the team model and flexing that way is helpful. So overall, staffing adjustments that we're looking into this budget, we're looking at those grade 5 teachers I mentioned. We are looking at what we're calling an elementary math coach. And we spoke about this at the budget workshop a little bit, and I'm glad to go into as much detail as you like. But the idea here is that we went into this year with a brand new position called the classroom coach, recognizing that that individual would be able to work with our teachers in order to help create the conditions in every classroom for every child to be engaged, to succeed, to be supported in what they need. And we've always done a really good job with that, but there was a need emerging around this. And so we created that position. Principals initially said we would love 1 per building. We said, well, let's pilot it with 1 person and see how that all goes. So we did, and so far the year has gone very well. It's been very successful, thanks in part to the person who's in the role, in part to the great support she's getting. She meets weekly with Dr. Carenti to have conversations about all things that are happening. She meets with Dr. Bliss, and the relationships across the board. The professional learning that this person is providing for our staff, and the move into leadership overall. So when our elementary team was talking, that model is working very well. However, they really identified a need not around necessarily the classroom piece, because this person is doing such a fine job doing that work, but really around math instruction and providing somebody who is equally expert in elementary math instruction to coach the elementary teachers in how to create the most engaging, student-centered experience for every child around math. As you know, every elementary teacher is a reading teacher, but not everyone necessarily is a math teacher. So to have somebody who truly is a specialist in this way, we anticipate will provide us with the same gains in a domain as our classroom coach has been doing around the domain of classroom climate and culture. So we're optimistic about that. We had some conversation, as I know, at the budget workshop and otherwise. There's just others up here, just small, 0.1. So again, 1.0 is a full-time person. 0.1 is a 1/10 of a position, right? So given the enrollment at East, there's a move up 0.1, 1/10 of a position for the existing reading specialist there. The 2 teachers over at Saks. This is the 0.4 is that additional specials for those 2 additional classes. We have a mandate around financial literacy that we need to meet at the high school. All students need to have a 0.5 credit in financial literacy to graduate high school beginning next year. So we've taken a look at that. Many of our students already do, but there's some that don't. So we believe this 0.6 will give us the staffing we need to do that for the rest of the students that aren't doing it. We also think it'll be an opportunity to really deepen and expand our business program, which had been very vibrant years ago, sort of student interest has just kind of shifted a little bit into some other ways around computer science and others, and now we start to see it building again around business, so we'd like to be responsive to that. And then the .4 in world languages, I can't be more specific yet at the high school because that's really driven by student enrollment. But when we talk about world language, you think about it as a department, but it's really 4 individual departments because the certifications are so specified. So you have Spanish, French, Latin, Mandarin. They can't, like a certified Spanish teacher can't teach Latin unless they have a Latin certification, right? So it's not like English or math or even science where there's more reciprocity across. In world language, it's really very specific. So it will enable us to be responsive to our students' interests and needs based on their course sign-up as we look at it. We also, driven by the shift in eligibility age for preschool going into kindergarten, we're looking at an additional pre-K teacher. We have, I think, 7 or 8 children in our pre-K program now who, because of that shift in the age of eligibility for K, are no longer eligible. So we need to open up another section of kindergarten in order to accommodate those. And as you know, in our pre-K, it's 50% students receiving services and 50% what they call typicals, right? So if you've got 7 students who are not eligible to begin kindergarten, 7 or 8 kids, then we're also going to be looking at bringing in another 7 or 8 typical students. So that is an entire section that we're looking to open up for that with those guys. The social worker, we currently are funding it in the ESSER grant, and we're looking to move this one into the budget. There's another one that we're not. The Literacy Academy teacher, continuing our investment on that. This will be the 3rd year of implementation there. And then the .4 reading specialist at Saks as well, which I think is currently grant funded. So that was another decision, again, to continue that position coming out of the grant. And then underneath is a TA here at the high school in innovation. We piloted something this year with somebody, and he's really a very skilled individual, who started creating, have you heard of badging? A badging system with our kids, where essentially, if you go into the high school library, you'll see that we have an incredible opportunities for kids. We have podcast studios, we have our makerspace, we have all kinds of different opportunities for students to create and develop, and to a green screen room, all of those things. But we needed a way to make sure that students knew what they were doing when they were there. They need to be trained on the equipment. So this individual created a system and is working with Michelle Lula and others where students will sort of learn how to operate the equipment, say in the podcast studio, take an assessment, demonstrate what they know, and then get a badge that says they are now eligible to use this space. If it's available, they can sign it out and they can use it. So we know that they can use the equipment, they know how to use it safely and use it well, and kids are doing this more and more. And this is something that I can see growing beyond just this area, really in lots and lots of ways. And I could even see it becoming something on a professional level with staff and others, and sort of building these badges, so to speak. So that's to continue that work. It's also, of course, we have the Dome, we have other opportunities around innovation. We have it at the high school, but this person would be available throughout the district as well as needed. And then the athletic director position, this is a .4 position, so 40% to full-time, as an assistant athletic director. As when we look across the FCAC, specifically across our region, you find very few schools still are operating with just one athletic director. There are assistants, many of them are full-time assistants across the board because the demands have changed so much. The expectations, the need to be at every event possible, just that alone is crushing for people. And so to have this additional .4 means that our athletic director and the assistant can still cover, we can have somebody at every one of the games. It's actually a great thing that so many of our kids go to all of our games and all of our events, but it does mean supervision is important too. So we want to make sure that we have the right coverage around all of it. It also will enable us to provide a higher level of supervision for our sub-varsity coaches. So what happens now is our athletic director supervises all of our varsity coaches, and then those varsity coaches supervise the sub-varsity coaches. The assistant athletic director would be much more involved in supervising the sub-varsity coaches, which is an important sort of quality control for us. So we feel strongly that's an important move. Of course, we also have a couple of reductions and deferrals. I mentioned the grade 1 teacher at South. That's more than just a 1.0 because, again, it's also that specials area, so it's a 1.2 reduction. We have a special education teacher that had been ESSER funded that we're going to be reducing. So it's a vacant position now, so through attrition, we're not going to have that. And same with the social worker position over at Saks. We're not going to be continuing that, and we're comfortable there because, in part, and I was on the phone again today with the town, we have a kids in crisis counselor there now, and feel that position can help to pick up some of that, and actually brings some things to the role that a school social worker maybe can't as an employee of the district versus somebody who works for external to the district and is available different hours and things. We also have things that we've deferred, things we discussed that we made a decision not to bring forward in the budget. That includes team leaders over at Saks. We have these teams, 4 per grade level, 6, 7, and 8, and really look to sort of informal leadership or what have you. But we've talked for years about having a team leader there, but didn't feel this was a year to move that forward. We've had some conversation about additional counselors here at the high school, and similarly made a decision it wasn't the year to move that forward. I mentioned the classroom coach position, made a decision not to move that forward. And also, a number of years ago, we reduced the librarian position over at Saks from a 2.0 to a 1.0. And we did that prior to the shift in start times and all of those things. And what we're finding now, in part because of the gap, the 90-minute gap between the upper and lower division, it's very, very hard for one person to be available, for all of those grades across all of it. So we also find that a school that size, with that many kids, 1,200, 1,300 kids, a second librarian could make good sense. So we talked about it. I do think it's a good move for us, but I think, again, that given where we are, given everything rolling off the grants and where the budget is, that's something that we'll revisit come next year for the 25-26 budget. Another of the drivers, of course, is our insurance plan, right? Our self-managed health insurance plan. And we have done some work around mitigating those costs through the years. And I'll be very quick here. You have this, and again, we're glad to talk about it more. But we asked Joe to just sort of put some numbers together for us so that we can understand, because we've been, again, working very, very hard through negotiations and otherwise on this. And I do want to say that all of the employee unions, especially the teachers union, they've been great partners in this because they recognize that if we can strike a fair balance between us, between the participants and the plan and the district and the funding, then again, more of the funding can be available for the work that we do in the kids in the classroom and being vested in what we care about the most. So some of the things that we've done, the migration from a fully insured plan to a high deductible plan since 2013. Again, that could not have happened without the partnership of the teachers union. Moving to 100% in estimated cost savings from that migration had we stayed in the typical copay plan. It's over $12 million. We've also, and sometimes you do all these things in partnership, and sometimes you do it because the arbitrator tells you have to, and that's where the co-insurance comes in. But it has saved us a significant amount through the years, about 3% per year. As you look at Joe's numbers there, over $400,000 per year cost offset. And so because of that one design change, and we still are one of the only municipal sectors, public sectors that I know of that has this copay, the co-insurance. So what happens is when you hit your deductible, in most other plans across boards or towns, you hit your deductible, the rest is paid 100% by the plan. Years ago, we talked about, it seems more fair if we all stay in the game. So the plan will pay 90%, but the participant picks up 10%, up to a maximum out of pocket per plan year. If they hit the maximum out of pocket, then it's entirely covered by the plan. So that one shift to go to that 90-10 for that gap instead of just 100% once the deductibles hit saves us, again, over $400,000 per year in our plan design. Shifting the amounts from $2,000, $4,000 to $2,200, $4,500 saves us, again, about $670,000 in the teacher's claim costs alone over those couple of years, and you see that. So those are some of the levers that we've been pulling through the years to try to save some money. We've also been working with Cigna to get them to give us all of that, the RX reimbursement, 100% back to us. We've also negotiated with them to bring them down that. Again, it seems like a small change, but because it's magnified and amplified, going down $2 per employee per month saves us over $15,000. Again, in the whole scheme of things may not seem like a lot, but all those little things add up. And again, 100% of the RX coming back to us directly. But it's not just plan design, it's also participant behavior, right? So we've worked hard to manage our retirees. Connecticut state law provides for any retiree to remain on the plan in the district that they retire from until they are eligible for Medicare. Now, they have to pay the full amount, but there's some adverse selection there, as you can imagine. If somebody knows they're going to need to use the plan, then they can stay in the district's plan. We have been working with our retirees to help them, when they are eligible for Medicare, to move them off of us as a supplemental into the TRB supplemental, which they've been paying for all the way through. Sometimes it's just familiarity. I know New Canaan's plan, I know how it works, so I'm going to stay in that. And so if we educate them to help them understand how the TRB plan works, and then they're much more willing and able to make that jump. Saves us money, and it winds up being good for them because, again, like all the certified staff are paying into this insurance plan every paycheck. It's a % or so of the pay. So savings through that. And then our wellness committee, which Joe mentioned a little bit when he was here before. The work that we've been doing as a wellness committee has really been focused on proactive health and helping to make sure that folks are taking the steps up front to identify things quickly and get the care that they need. We also, as an administrative group, in the next couple of weeks, I think, we'll be sitting down with Cigna and we do a year in review. And we look at utilization, we look at what care is being sought most frequently, and we find that the work, and then we use what we find there to inform the work with our Be Well committee, with our wellness committee. And we do find that our preventative care access is pretty high for our staff. We're working to get it higher. That's sort of the colonoscopy campaign, and otherwise we want to make sure people are getting in and doing those things. We also are glad to see that our staff is taking advantage of behavioral health and mental health and other services like that. A couple of years ago, I think probably 5 years ago now, we brought in an EAP, an employee assistance plan, which is also available to every one of our employees. So if anyone feels the need for them or their family, and actually we pay a little bit more for that. It's not a large number, but we pay a little more because we want it to be available to every employee of the New Canaan Public Schools, whether or not they're insured by Cigna or in our plan. So even employees who are not in our plan can take advantage of this employee assistance program if they need it. Because again, we think that that's a really important thing to do. All of these strategies and efforts and the things that we've worked to save, just trying to, again, show a little trend. And this was a bit arbitrary, but I figured it might be helpful. Started with our actual expenditure from 2019. The blue line is a 9% trend. The red line is a 6% trend. And then the green those are our actual spend. And I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at this, and I'm going to keep playing with it. This is total claims without stop-loss reimbursement. So you see the big jump, say in 22. We had $3.2 million that came back to us in stop-loss reimbursement that would have moved that from 16 million down 13 million. So that would have been much lower, but I didn't do the all-in, so I didn't want to include the stop-loss reimbursement without including into it the stop-loss costs. That didn't seem right. So I'll keep developing these a little bit before we go to the Board of Finance and get your feedback on what might be helpful or what might not be. But I think that it's important to note that the way a self-managed insurance plan works is you're going to have some years that you're outperforming, and then you're going to have some that you don't. And you always hope that the plan is to make sure you have more that outperform than don't. And we talk about the reserves, we talk about using the reserves to fund the forward and do those things with it. But that's always how a self-insured plan works. You're not going to win every single time. 2019 I thought was a good number because in 2019, as you saw on the other slide, we had everybody over to the HSA. We had completed many of the strategies that we had been working through to bring down these costs. So it was expected that we'd be moving more on trend from 2019 forward. So we've still been able to beat that. And if you look on balance, we've saved a pretty significant amount above either a 6 or a 9% trend for sure in this. So just thought it was a good visualization to use. And then I put this together, and then after it was all said, I said, I think we're almost better going to the budget book itself and going into this. But wanted to just show, this is not, I'm not an actuary, so I should really have Joe do this in the future. But I wanted to just show the trend in claims from 2021 to the 2025 requested. And you see there is a jump right now from 24 projected to 25. And when Joe was here, he explained that we really don't have enough months of experience to do this with much accuracy yet. So this is his best estimate. But the other thing he showed, if you'll remember, when we go back 12 months and what our actuals have been for the last 12 months, we've got some high months, some of the highest months that we've had for a while. And they're pretty consistent. And even if, as new months come in, those highest months aren't going to roll off. So as we build this out, that all has to be taken into consideration. But we're looking at a 12% change year to year. We're budgeting to keep the HSA deposit flat, and we are projecting about a 17% increase now in that stop loss premium. When we go back, the stop loss is a challenge, and you see that it's gone up about 48% a year since 2021, because in that 22 year, again, we got over $3 million back in stop loss, and that was over the $300,000. So that alone made it challenging for us to keep a vendor and to continue. We've had some good experience. There's certain things that we do in our planning and strategy that may cost a little bit more, but we feel it's the right thing to do. For instance, we don't allow stop loss carriers to laser someone, if you know what that means, which is essentially when they do that, they identify an individual and say, all right, we'll do stop loss for everybody, but not this person and not that person. We don't allow that because we think that there's more risk there. In the aggregate, we really work hard to get to a 20% aggregate stop loss number, where the carriers try to get us to 25%. But we really feel like if we go to 25%, then we have to carry more in our reserve. And so by keeping it at 20, it keeps our reserve a little bit tighter, and we think is responsive to what we've been asked to do. So I anticipate we'll have more in-depth conversation about the ISF and the deposit there. And what I'm planning to do is have Joe on the phone for our workshop on Tuesday night, if that's helpful, so that we can get into the details around this too. So I'm going to take a break for a little bit and turn it over to our Director of Finance and Operations to take a little bit of a look in the binder, and I think he's going to take a look at the drivers and some of the highlights around the drivers. But as you think about the budget, and putting this together, we are, first and foremost, we're focused on making sure that we continue to put resources where it matters most for kids. We want to make sure that we maintain the excellence in the programs that we have, investing in those high leverage initiatives that we have, such as the Literacy Academy that we have. We haven't mentioned or talked about our launch program or our alternative program, the downtown campus, other investments that we've made that, again, similar to some of the others I mentioned with insurance, benefit our kids, but also help us in the long run with some management of our budget. If we didn't have, say, our launch program, each one of those students individually would be outplaced outside of our district at high cost with an inferior experience. And actually, our program, I think, is so good that we've actually got a neighboring district looking at having a student or two come into our district next year to participate. Same with our downtown campus, with that alternative program. Without that program, many of those students, if not all of them, would really struggle to be here at the high school, and it could result in placements elsewhere. And that's, not only is it not a good financial move, we don't think it's a good educational move. We think children deserve and should be educated in their hometown, with their peers, with their community. Because we know that they're not just in school, they also are living here. They're part of the community, part of the town in this region and what they do. So everything we can do to bring our kids here, have them here in school, with their peers, with their friends, with their community, we think that that's a win. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean for a moment.
Forgive me if I don't go up to the podium, but I have a lot of paper here. If I could ask you to turn to page 23 in the book, which is the superintendent's request year-to-year drivers. It essentially is, a 5-page explanation of why the budget is projected to increase. So if you look at if you start at the top, The overall superintendent's operating budget request is 109,765, 687, an increase of 6,726,478, 6.7 million over our approved 24 budget of 103.0 million, or an increase of 6.53%. As Brian mentioned, that if you normalize or exclude the ISF, the 6.53%, or the 6.7 million year-to-year increase, or 6.5% drops to 3.9 or 4.39%. So what we're excluding there, just for normalization purposes, you're excluding an ISF, which is running at about 19% overall. So when we start with salaries, let's see, hold on a sec. Of all the non-benefit drivers, salaries are projected to increase by $3.1 million, including, as you'll see on the chart, $2.424 million in certified salaries. Of that $2.4 million increase, 1.9 is already in the base operating fund, and what we're showing here is an additional $500K related to the plus 5.7 FTEs that Brian discussed earlier. That 5.7 is 333K, plus there's another 2.4 shift from the ARP grant funds of 148. So of the 2.4, 1.9 is in the base currently, and another 482,000 overall for those the new FTEs, the requested FTEs, and the shift from grants. If you go to page 24, you'll see up at the top there's an additional 400K for non-certified employees. There's also a net increase of other salaries in the amount of $305,000, which includes a provision for $305,000 for salaries yet to be determined for unaffiliated employees and bargaining units that have not yet been negotiated. We also have in there $240K for teachers, grid progression. This is for teachers who have earned an additional certification or degree. And then partly offsetting those two increases, we've also baked in assumed savings of $90,000 for unpaid leave of absences and $150,000 of savings for turnover savings. And what I mean by that is when a teacher retires and is backfilled with a less senior teacher, there's some savings associated with that. So for example, a teacher retiring at 120K and the backfill comes in at 70K, there's $50,000 of savings. When you look at salaries and benefits combined, it's about $91 million of that $109 million. It's about 83% of the total budget, and more than 90% of the total year-to-year increase overall. And as Brian alluded to, talking about the big five, salary and benefits combined, and when you consider adding in outplaced tuition, transportation, and utilities, these five major accounts represent 93% of the overall budget request and 96.5% of the $6.7 million year-to-year increase. So those five categories of spend represent 6.5 of the $6.7 million requested year-to-year increase. If you go to bottom of page 24 and into 25, in non-salary, non-benefit accounts, contracted services, one of our major object codes, totals $1.6 million and drive 103K of the overall increase in the budget request. The biggest drivers in the 103K are one-on-one nursing in special ed, which is a new requirement expected for full year 25, and $50K for legal services associated with increasing negotiations for teachers, food services, and administrative assistants. On page 25, property services, in the overall request is $4.8 million. It's a net decrease of $58K. The most significant driver there is the change in the cost of central office and a net reduction of utilities of about $87,000. Related to our central office cost, at 39 Locust, our rent and our taxes totaled $297,000 a year. And for 220 Elm, we expect that our common charges, cleaning services, and supplies will be about $173,000. So all told, a year-to-year decrease of $124,000. And partly offsetting some of those reductions are an increase for facility services totaling $46K. We recently put in 4 new boilers at the elementaries and at Saks. And for full year '25, those boilers will be off warranty, so we'll need a service contract to maintain them. Also, some additional tree trimming and other landscaping services are in there. Also, we have an increase of $56,000 for software licensing and $45,000 for software support. On page 26, purchase services overall budgeted at $11 million, a year-to-year increase of $509,000. The 2 biggest drivers there are general ed transportation, up $95K and consistent with our 5-year 2% contract with DATCO, and also special ed outplaced tuition increasing year to year by about $415,000. Supplies are the next major category, budgeted at $1.4 million, which is up year to year by $66,000, primarily driven by textbooks, which are up $33,000, non-consumables are up $10,000, and athletic supplies up about $7,000. The equipment account comes in at $296,000, an increase year to year of $13,000. That's on page 26 as well, and is primarily driven by $11K for replacement of life science equipment at the high school. And then down on page 27, there's a category called Other, overall budgeted at $248,000, with the year-to-year increase of $14,000 attributable to dues, fees, and subscriptions. So total of the, you'll see on that page, total of the non-salary, non-benefits accounts totals $19.3 million, and accounts for a year-to-year net increase of $648,000, or about 10% of the overall budget increases. Recall that salary and benefits is roughly about 90% of the budget increase. The non-salary, non-benefits accounts for the other 10%, obviously. Finally, in the other fees and offsets, we're projecting an overall reduction of $11K due to Turkey Bowl receipts, as it will be held in Darien in November '24. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like saying, but wait, there's more. Because the Board of Education's budget is not just an operating budget, it's also a capital budget. The operating budget is what it takes to operate our budget each year, right? That's what we've been talking about, what we've been going through, and that's where we put a lot of our focus. However, we also have a capital budget that is similarly important in that it's our investment in our 1 million square feet of facilities. How do we maintain that investment and be good stewards of the facilities that we have? So I'm going to quickly just go through that as well. I know that it's a lot. We don't lead with facilities for a reason, but it'll be quite a bit quicker, I promise you. There are 3 dimensions to capital. It's facilities, technology, and transportation. When we get into facilities, I'm only just going to hit a couple of highlights. What we're looking at, it's broken out by building and also district as well across the top. District gives us the flexibility to go where things are most needed. You'll see there's a rhythm to this. Some of the recurring capital costs, things like painting, the repointing of brick, where we have bricks at the buildings. We need to keep that in good shape, keep doing that kind of work. You'll see some engineering services at the district level, right? So that gives us that flexibility to develop projects. So we typically, we don't do a design build project. We do the design, we work with engineers and spec it out, do the design, and then we put that out to bid. There are some places that put the concept out to bid and do what's called a design build. We don't think that's the best way to do it. We think that having the engineers doing the work at a very detailed level for us, developing the best scope and scale of the project prior to putting out to bid is the right way to do it, and we've had great success with that. So we put our engineering costs in the district line, and then the projects so it becomes a 2-year timeline, essentially, for most large projects at a minimum. So we have the engineering services there in the district. We have painting that goes through, then some of the things that we've talked about that were high priorities from the facility study that we did with Silver Petrocelli. Over at East, we have our phase 3 of the flooring replacement. We've done the classrooms, we've done many of the hallways. Phase 3 continues with the hallways, and that's moving from just your typical tiles to really, is it LVT? A whole different material that is easier to clean, lasts longer, and I think certainly looks better. So we're continuing that, and then some other things along the way. We are looking at relocating the pre-K playground over at West and doing some work around. We've began doing work with the fire alarm panels. Those are starting to age out, so we want to make sure that that whole system remains up to date and effective. Over at Saks, again, we've got over 250,000 square feet of space, so it's quite a large place. We're looking at ceiling tiles, some painting, floor replacement. They're also in phase 3. We also are doing some of the pre-work for the roof replacement. So we've replaced the roofs at South, at East. We've done a lot of West. We've done the high school. Saks is left. So again, we start with doing the engineering study, getting the scope of the project down, understanding what we need to do. There's parts that we don't have to do, of course. The new addition is still new. There's no reason to do that. But there's other areas of Saks that we need to take care of. So we begin by getting that engineering study completed. Over at the high school, again, continuing with the painting work that we're doing. Looking at that auxiliary gym, that's the smaller gym that's out there, refinishing that floor. That was in last year, I think, and we delayed it for a year. Looking at our classroom space, getting some plans around some of those elective classroom spaces. Again, the building, we like to think of the high school as being new, but it really is coming up on 20 years. When you think 2006, 2007 was when things were wrapping up in the most recent renovation that we had here. So we want to look at those elective spaces and see what opportunities we have to modernize some of those spaces and to take advantage. There's a lot of room down there, and I think that we can do some really creative things. We're also, you'll see in the look ahead, you'll see we're looking at the video production studio and some other opportunities that might be there. We're also thinking about the foods lab. We have one foods lab that's used almost every period of every day. If we had 2, they'd both be used almost every period of every day. It's a very popular program, so how can we do some other things to meet the needs of our kids? So that's at the high school. Now, in the vehicles, as you know, we have insourced our special education transportation. Those are the Suburbans that we have. And for the last 8 years or so, and we plan to continue as long as the board is supportive, we replaced 3 of those a year. So we purchased 3 new Suburbans, and we roll out the 3 that are, it's not always the highest mileage, but the 3 that are most troublesome for maintenance or otherwise. And so it keeps that fleet in pretty good shape. We've got 21, 23 Suburbans or so. So it works out to be every 7 or 8 years that we're cycling out and getting new ones in general. Again, we don't just do it based on the year. We look at the vehicle itself, and we identify which ones are having the most problems, who has the highest mileage, which ones are needing repair more than others, that kind of thing. But this has worked very well. We buy them off state contract here in town, and our only challenge recently has been the delivery times. So we're actually still waiting for the vehicles that we ordered a year ago, which is a problem. We also do have some that are retrofitted for wheelchairs for our students. So these will transport our pre-K students that are in our special ed program They'll transport special education students who have needs, transportation needs in district. They also will transport students out of district, in out-of-district placements and others. So they do quite a bit. Our drivers, they will drive, say, in the morning, and then there might be a time gap between what they're doing in the morning and what they need to do in the afternoon to drive. And so they'll often serve as teaching assistants. They'll do some supervision for us in cafeterias, other places. We have one that will help with the math lab here at the high school. We've got other, they're involved in different ways across the district in helping out. And so it works out very well. So they're not just driving, but they're also a part of our school communities, and they're getting to know the kids and the teachers and making other contributions as well, which is great. Sometimes working in the print shop. Yes, sir. So we're keeping that schedule now with this budget. And then the last part is our technology lease. And while we don't lease the equipment, we finance the money essentially. So what we do is we have $800,000 that we're able to spend per year, and that costs us $200,000 a year to do it. So over time, the decision was made, instead of just a capital outlay annually, to do it this way. There is some financing costs involved, but you'll see that we are below the $800,000 here because it was $600,000. But then once we went to the infusion of technology that we have, the cybersecurity needs that we have. I know the board met with Ian in executive session and went through some of what he does. We really need that additional funding to keep our stuff state-of-the-art, keep ourselves protected, and make sure that we can best support our teachers and our kids and what they're doing with it. So we have $800,000 a year of spend. This year, that'll cost us approximately $773,000. And then next year, will be the final year, and will be a little bit over $800,000 because of the financing costs. The decision may be made at a Board of Finance level or otherwise, if interest rates go up or stay up, that they'd rather spend the money instead of financing it, because this decision was made when interest rates were very, very low. So, but that's, as long as we have that $800,000 to invest, how we get that is just mechanical for the Board of Finance or otherwise. So putting those three things together, facilities, technology, transportation, it's a total capital budget request of about $4.8 million. Last year, I think we were about 5.2 by the time we were done. And next year, it will jump up if we do that Saks roof, because you're talking about a significant space. But as you can imagine, the way capital works, you have those swings based on what those needs are. You can have a couple of years where you don't have a big capital ask because you don't have a large project. Others where if you're redoing a roof or doing something else, you can add a couple of $1 million into this, and it's just what it takes. Which is why when we looked at that NCEP, the net current expenditures per pupil, that includes donations, it includes in-kind. So when we do our filing, the town works with the board, and they set percentages of town expenditures that benefited the Board of Education, and so that sort of gets shifted over into our budget on the ledger. So a good, for instance, is the SROs. So we have the two SROs. The funding for those exists in the police budget, right, in the town budget. But at the end of the year, when we do our filing, we're sort of charged for 10 months of their salary and benefits in our spending that gets filed with the state to compute that net current expenditure per pupil. So we have the two SROs now that we're paying that way. It's not in our budget, but we cover that cost in our net current expenditures. As we look to expand that program, more of those would come into. So does that make sense? So that's how that accounting is done. So that's all included in the net current expenditures per pupil. What's not included are things like putting a new roof on, or doing a parking lot, or doing those kinds of renovations, because the state understands that those kinds of capital projects will not only will they come and go, like you're going to do a roof. We're putting 30-year roofs on, I believe, instead of the 20 we used to do. So not only will it kind of be cyclical that way, but the cost will also depend upon how the Board of Finance decides to fund it. Some towns pay up front and then go out to bond later. Some go out to bond up front. Some do 15 years, some do 20 years, some do other things. So a Board of Education doesn't make those decisions. Therefore, they don't carry the costs in their operating budget or for their NCEP calculations, because you don't have the agency to make those decisions as a Board of Ed. That's for the Board of Finance to decide kind of how to do the financing. Does that make sense? Okay. And so, what do we do with all of this? We focus on what matters most, thinking first and foremost about our kids and everyone working together to contribute towards our kids and the educational experience that they have, making sure we are respectful and resourced to empower those who serve to do so to the very best of their ability, thinking about, again, that entire educational experience for our kids, long and short term. I think we are reaping the benefits of some of our previous long-term priorities and strategic moves, and we have some others, as you can see, that we're going to continue to make in this budget. And then to maintain our status as a premier district, not just in Connecticut, but nationally and beyond, something that all of us should be very proud of. So, thank you. Well, I know there's a lot. I know it's a long presentation. So what's worked well in the past, but certainly whatever you would most like to do, is for board members to have the book, take a look through, and jot down questions and send them to Hugo and to me. And what we'll do is put those together, work together as a cabinet. We'll put time aside on Friday, time aside on Tuesday morning to get answers to those. And then when we come together as a workshop, we'll categorize them by subject. If there's questions about staffing or ISF or other things, so that we can be focused in that workshop. And gives everybody a time to sort of digest things. We'll have them in writing too, but that can be the framework for our discussion, starting at 5:30 over at 220 Elm. And then if we need more time after that, we'll figure it out. We'll make more time. But if that's the will of the board, we're happy to do that. If you'd like to do something else, we're at your service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lutzy, and thank you to the administration and all the teachers. This is a lot of work that you guys put into this, and the results obviously speak for themselves in a number of ways. I know in the last couple of years that is exactly the way that we've handled it, and I thought it's worked well. So if there are any other suggestions, questions, I think that we take the book, we take a few days off, we get to work, and please start sending us questions sooner rather than later, so that we can get the administration and the teachers to work on them as well. Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So ideally, we should try to get questions by Thursday. Is that so that you can start processing them on Friday through the weekend?
The sooner the better, but if something hits you on Monday morning, send it over. Tuesday morning, send it over. It's a dialogue, so and I know people have different ways of processing and all. So sooner the better, but we're open to the discussion at any time. Thanks.
I appreciate that, but yeah, I think the goal would be Thursday if we can all get that done, so that at least they have Friday and then the weekend, and then we have our workshop next week. Great. All right, moving on to comments from the public. Seeing that there are none, we'll move on to announcements and future business, which I also don't think we have any, but I'll wait.
Actually, so what we do this similar to policy that we do a first read on the budget. Okay. So we should do a first move and a second. Lisa just reminded me.
Yeah. So, motion to accept as a first read. Second, Julie. There's no vote. Announcements of future business, please.
Yes, yep, and not much. I mean, it is lots of budget and conversations ahead. Looking forward to all of that. And to simply say that I like snow on weekends. So it was nice to have a forecasted storm on the weekend, and I'm not sure what Tuesday is going to bring, Tuesday night with wind and other rain. So we'll keep an eye on that. But otherwise, we have our exams, our midterm exams at the high school next week. And continuing on, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, thank you. And Dr. Lutzy, you are our sage when it comes to weather forecasting. I saw Dr. Lutzy 3 or 4 times last week just as the weather was going back and forth between rain and snow and rain and snow, and he looked me dead in the eye and said, "There's a 99.9% chance we're getting a nice storm this weekend," and we did. So thank you. So I'm going to call you rather than looking at the Weather Channel from now on. All right, so let's get a motion to adjourn, please. Brendan, second. Matt Wexler, all in favor? Excellent. Thank you. Have a great night.